The Holy Gospel according to Matthew chapter 14.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and go on ahead to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking towards them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." And he said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and began to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. And those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. So as part of the preparation for my ordination, I spoke with a lot of people. One of the people I reached out to was on the recommendation of the Sharps. I spoke to their former pastor, Benita Knox. And when she emailed me back, she gave me this bit of advice. She said, "Make sure your family and friends all take plenty of pictures and keep the memories for you. And know also that the Spirit is there, that Jesus is with you among the people, and the triune God is indeed in that place. And carry those facts with you throughout your ministry." I was struck by her words not only because they were a beautiful illustration of what to look forward to, they were good advice, but also because they were echoing themes that I was already planning on preaching on in the sermon. That is, in so many of these texts, we see two different kinds of belonging that the people need. They need belonging to family and friends, to the community around them, just as much as they need to know that they belong to God, that God is present with them in their hard moments and in their quiet moments. I was first struck by this in our reading about Elijah. Elijah, for a little bit of context, has just come off one of the highest peaks that you could ever have. He devised a contest with the prophets of Baal and was like, "You set up this sacrifice and you call on your God. I'll let you take however you want so that he can set it on fire. And then if he does that, then we know that he's a real God." And of course, the prophets called and called and called, and all day they danced, they sang, they called upon their God, and nothing happened. Elijah comes, and even in the midst of a drought, he gathers gallons, immense amounts of water, and pours it on top of the altar that he has made. And he calls on God, and God sends down fire that not only consumes the sacrifice, but all of the water as well. The drought is broken, and the people are freed. In loyalty to God, the people who are there to witness the event rise up, and they kill all of the prophets of Baal. And then the queen says, "I'm going to do the same thing to you, Elijah." And even though he's seen the power of God, he runs. He runs all the way to Mount Horeb. And God is with him that whole way as well, giving him food and shelter as he journeys through the wilderness. And yet, as he arrives on this holy mountain, where long before him Moses met God as well, Elijah feels alone. Twice he explains his condition to God, that his life is in danger, that the other prophets have been killed, and that he feels all alone. Even God showing up with signs and miracles before all of the people are not enough to give him comfort in his heart. And even as God shows up with awesome signs, shakings of the earth, fire, and even in absolute silence, Elijah trusts that this is God, but it's not enough. Just as before all of these signs occurred to him, before God drew near to him and stood in front of him so close that Elijah veils his face so that he does not see God and die. His lament is unchanged. God is here, but I am still alone. I am still persecuted. The other prophets are dead, and I think I'm going to die soon as well. And so what does God do in response? God points Elijah not back to the awesome powers that he has witnessed, not with promises that God will always be with Elijah walking beside him, but he points him back to community. He says, "Go, anoint kings," a reminder that the kings who are persecuting you will not last forever, and giving you an in with the next political generation. Go and anoint for yourself a successor that I name, so that you will not be alone in bearing the burden of prophecy. And know that there are 7,000 people in Israel who have also remained faithful. You are not alone, Elijah. You will not be alone. This persecution will not last forever. Elijah needs both of these aspects, the community of people around him and the presence of God, to be able to live a life that is more than fear, a life that is more than grief. We are no different. This is why a little bit of preaching to the choir, obviously, and somewhat literally, because we are all gathered here in a church. But I think that this is a true expression of where God is, not only walking beside us in the form of Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, but also forming around us a community of people so that we are not alone in our faith and we are not alone in our living. We need both of these to live an abundant life. And so that is God's plan for us. The presence of God and the presence of God's people is always God's plan for his people that he loves. We see it in the other readings as well. If you remember back to last week, Paul was lamenting that his fellow Israelites, his fellow Jews, did not seem to be believing in Jesus. Though they had the law, the prophets, the promises, the covenant, they weren't seeing the same things that he felt. Though he was building churches all across Europe and Asia Minor, though he was surrounded by hundreds of people who loved him, sometimes people who were irritated with him, but that's part of living with people too, he still felt alone. And so in these chapters of Romans, he's working through what does it mean for his people that he loves, that he feels separated from them. He has community, but it's not as big of a community as he would like, not just because of the numbers, but because he worries about the people that he loves. And so he's laying out how this works. Chapter 9 last week, chapter 10 this week. And he says, God is near to us, in our hearts and on our lips, not just in our minds, not just in the scriptures we say, not just in the miracles around us. God is intimately near to us, living within our very bodies, in the food that we consume and the words that we say. But God's power of raising Jesus from the dead, the awesome miracles of healing and restoration are not enough. We need to talk to each other. We need to share that good news with one another. Faith comes not just by seeing the awesome acts of God, by working out what it means together, talking to one another, in community with one another. We need both. To cap it all off, our gospel takes a slightly different perspective. Instead of starting with God's presence and adding community to it, we start with community without God. The disciples are all shoved into the boat by Jesus and sent off, perhaps to keep them out of trouble, perhaps because John the Baptist has indeed just been killed. And it is dangerous to be a popular preacher, someone who is pointing to God and a power other than Herod's. Maybe he just literally needs some time to process because he has been pursued by the crowds for so long. But whatever it is, he gathers them all up and sends them together onto the lake. And then, when they see God coming with signs and wonders, walking on water, they are afraid. They're like, this is not how the world works. And that community with Jesus still on the outside is also not enough. Not enough to keep off the fear of what's going on and what's going to happen to them. So Peter asks to bridge that gap, to come to Jesus from the group of disciples gathered on the boat. And he goes, and he falters, like all of us do sooner or later. And Jesus catches him by the hand. When he asks for help, when he reaches out to the people around him, he is taken by the hand and led back to the community on the boat. And it is only at that moment when they are all together again that the storm ceases. Not when Jesus grabs his hand, but when they are all together. That is when the storm ends, and that is when they worship together and recognize who God is. I can almost picture it. The first person says, "Truly, this is the Son of God." And then they all say it because someone has said it out loud, and now they don't have to be the first. They can admit that what they've seen is extraordinary. They can admit that God is with them when they can all see it together. They know that this isn't a ghost. This isn't a hallucination of a single person. But this is an experience of God that we have all had that binds us as a community. And that is the moment when the storm ceases. When they are together with God and together with one another. And that is God's plan for us always, right? God with us. Jesus, Emmanuel. One of us as a human and God, truly God, come near to us so that we are never alone. We have Jesus incarnate in a body, and we have the body of Christ, which is the church. The world is a scary place. There are persecutions. There are fires and earthquakes, storms that can break mountains, storms of fear that break apart households and countries. This is true as it always has been true, but it is not the only truth. We are not alone in those storms. God is with us, and we are with each other. No matter where we go, no matter what happens, we are not alone, and it is good. So we say, thanks be to God. Amen.